Hello, happy Homebrew Wednesday. It's the first one I've done for a wee while because I've not really been doing much brewing at all. But today it's a tasting video for the last beer I made. So on the 23rd of January I made an 1887 Fuller's X, which is a kind of mild, from Ron Pattinson's blog. Didn't film it because if I remember rightly I had a shocking hangover that day. I'm going to put the link to the recipe down below, but just an overview. I used Chevalier as a pale malt, quite a bit of amber, invert number 2, and Heritage light crystal malt, and hops, Fuggles, EKG. And for the yeast, the recipe asked for whitbread yeast, 1099, I think that's Y yeast. And I cheaped out a little bit and I used Cross Maloof 4, which I think's the same as SO4, which should hopefully be the same strain, or at least very, very similar. In terms of numbers, Brewfather varied quite a bit to the blog. So Brewfather OG was expected 1053, Final Gravity 1009, for a beer about 5.8. The blog recipe, it was actually 1051, 1014, and I got 1048 and 1014. Weirdly enough, the yeast didn't over attenuate. That's the first in a while I've not had it shoot way down, which is more surprising considering about 20% of the fermentables here is invert sugar. So, just my usual bottle conditioned. It's been in the bottle over 2 weeks, and popped it in the fridge overnight, brought it out the fridge about an hour and a half ago, so it should be around room temperature, although it's very cold and miserable here. So let's see how it's turned out. Oh, barely a hiss. It's not carbonated at all. Well, that's very disappointing. Yeah. I think I will need to give all the bottles a bit of a shake and disturb the sediment again. They're in a reasonably warm area of the house. I mean, they're not next to a radiator, and I don't plan on moving them anywhere much warmer. It is crystal clear. It's kind of hard to see because it's a little bit darker, but it's a nice ruby colour. Bit of caramel, that kind of nondescript sort of aroma. Does have a small, very, very small dry hop, like a 7 grams or something. Anyway, cheers. It's not bad at all though. A little bit sweet, which probably because it's not fermented the carbonation drop. Bit of dried fruit, a figgy, jammy sort of taste. Caramel, but not sickly sweet cloying or butterscotch diacetyl sort of caramel. That will be good. It will. It's going to need a wee while. I say I'll go and disturb the bottles. Give it another, probably 3 or 4 weeks. It's one of those beers where I don't think a bit of age on it is going to do it any harm whatsoever. The brew day went reasonably well, other than being down in my numbers. I did notice my mash pH was very low. I think it was about 4.9. And I'm inclined to trust it because I changed the batteries in the pH meter and I calibrated it very recently after I changed the batteries. So I think it is quite accurate. So I don't know what was the cause of that. So I took the pH reading about 20 minutes into the mash. When I seen it was so low, I added about a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda to try and bump it up again. And kind of being a bit shoddy, I didn't take a second reading. I trusted that would be in the ballpark. Everything else in the brew day went fine. That was the first time using the new rolled plates in the Grainfather, and what a difference they made. I set it all up the night before, and it was an absolute doddle. I put the overflow inlet and the additional filter all together, and put a Jubilee clip under here, so they were all held in place. And that meant that rather than normally the top plate sinks down and goes kind of at weird angles into my mash, it stayed perfectly level on the top at a good height, because it was balancing. Oh, balance. It was propped up by the overflow pipe, which I'll be doing again. Yeah. I'm very surprised it's no carbonated. I think this might be the first beer I've used, the Cross Maloof 4. So, possibly with a high percentage of simple sugars. I got a bit tired. I also didn't. I usually aerate the wort with a drill and a stainless steel paint stirrer. I didn't do that this time because I was using dry yeast. And in theory, dry yeast doesn't need to be aerated before use. Shouldn't make a difference. I think it's something to do with the much higher cell count in the packets. But that was just me being shoddy. I think I should have still done it just out of good practice. Still had nutrients added. About a teaspoon and a half of DAP. It's a very pretty colour. Oh. It's a nice ruby when it's under the light. Let's see if I can get a decent image of it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's crystal clear. Yeah, I think that'll be a good beer. It's my rule of thumb is if it's better than things I've paid money for, then that's a successful brew day. And this is way better than most like amber ales, things I've tried. And it'll be even better when it's got a bit of carbonation. Yeah, so that was the last thing I made. And I got a week off next month where I plan on doing another couple of beers. So I'm good for beer at the moment, so there's no great hurry. So I'm going to do the Traquair House ale clone. I've got all the stuff now just to do the last little modification to the big mash tun. So I'm going to make that in here. It's a slightly bigger grain bill. That's a really simple recipe. I think that's a smash beer. I think that's just pale malt and Fuggles or EKG. I'm going to use a Cross Maloof beer, the Celtic ale yeast. I'm going to use that. And for the pale malt, I've got Plumage Archer, which I've never used before. It was like the precursor to Maris Otter. So, yeah, that's planned later in the month, and I may be doing an 80 shilling. No sure. I've got another kilo of invert number 2 to use up, and it's vacuum sealed in a solid block, so I think it'll last a reasonable length of time. That's what when I was making it, the temperature got too high, so rather than it staying a syrup, it went into a hard, like candy block. So when it came time to using it, smashed it up with this, and then spent ages trying to dissolve it before tipping it into the grainfather. No scorching, so whatever I did, it was successful. And I added it right at the start of the boil as well, so there was no issues whatsoever. Other than it took a little bit longer than planned to get it to dissolve. But yeah, that's it. Nothing else. No new bits of kit. This year at some point, I think I'd like to make the move to kegging. I'd always said I wasn't in a great hurry to do it, but it's not as much of the actual bottling process, it's cleaning bottles. I'm kind of sick of. So, there'll still be some beers that I would bottle. But yeah, it would just be handy to dump a batch into a keg. So I'll try and get proper brew footage next time, especially using the new setup. And provided I'm not too hungover, that's the only thing that kind of stops me. Quite often I brew on a Sunday and I have beers on the Saturday, and I feel like death in here on this Sunday, so recording footage is usually the last thing in my mind. But till next time, cheers.